Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Citizens of Lorcana podcast, a podcast where we invite you to be a part of their world. Today, we are once again talking all about the North American Continentals, although this take will be a retrospective on the event. So without further ado, let's jump into the episode. Hey everyone, welcome to another week. Last week, we talked all about what we hope to get out of the North America Continental Challenge. And this week we are talking about what we got out of it. But before we dive into our takeaways from the event, James, Citizens of Lorcana Nation is waiting to hear how you represented us at the LCQ. How'd you do?
Poorly?
Come on.
I got knocked out in the second round of my LCQ pod.
Well, tell us about it.
Well, I mean, round one, I did beat up on a 10-year-old girl, so there is that. No, I mean, I can go into more details about that match later, but basically, in the first round, we got matched up and won the dice roll, which is good because she was playing some hyper aggro, and I managed to win the first and third game. And of course, hyper aggro going first is a tough match, and she rocked me in the second game, and then I got paired up in the second round against Ruby Sapphire, and so I was playing Ruby Amethyst. That was I made to run into a LCQ field of a wide variety of decks. I took what I thought was one of the best of three decks, not a best of two deck, to try and win some stuff going into the LCQ. And I think it would have gone really well if I had not had a deck that was actively fighting against me, and giving me some bad cards when I was drawing and not letting me draw, which is kind of what I need to do. So
that's exactly what I was going to ask you. You felt pretty good about your deck going into it, but yeah. I mean, are you happy with how it played aside from it not giving you the cards that you needed?
Yeah, I mean, I thought the deck was well built. I just didn't think I just didn't draw in the second round, both games. I got 0-2'd. The Ruby Sapphire player actually did not have that great of a draw either. They didn't get a lot of their cards. They didn't have a handful of cards and a bunch of ink either game, but they had enough, and that's all it took. So.
Well, I think at the end of the day, and we'll talk about this, I think, a little bit later when we talk about, what happened. But I can't believe that there's anybody out there who knows as much or more than Zach Bivens. But at the end of the day, the amount of knowledge that you have, it could carry you if the competition was based on your knowledge. But at the end of the day, it's what the cards give you.
Yeah.
And no amount of skill can make up for a bricked hand there. So
yeah. And it was pretty bad. At one point in game two, about 6 or 7 turns in, I don't remember exactly how far it was, but basically my hand was 3 Be Prepareds and nothing else.
Ouch.
And yeah, I just ran out of cards. I had a bunch of uninkables, and I got down to that, and there's nothing you can do. There was multiple turns in that game where it was draw pass and waiting for something that was playable, and waiting for my opponent to do something because he saw I was in dire straits, and he's like, well, I'll just continue building my ink and building up my hand and wait for me to do something so that then he would have answers for everything, and he did.
Well, regardless of the outcome, we're proud that you repped us. I'm curious if anybody else from Citizens of Lorcana Nation participated in the LCQ. Did anybody go farther than the second round? But that's a pretty unforgiving format. One loss and you're gone. So
yep, you're out.
All right, so let's dive into this. I want to start with takeaways from this event, and after we share our takeaways, we can talk about fun stories and anecdotes from the weekend. But I want to start with our positive takeaways. And James, I don't know how we want to handle this. You can either respond after each one, or you can wait until I go through, all my takeaways. Whatever you want.
let's just go through them one by one, and we'll have a little talk about each one because I figure most of them are just kind of the same, and we both had similar thoughts about the whole weekend. So,
All right, my first takeaway, and you probably agree, was that it was fun. This is the
yeah,
this is the most fun that I've had at a Lorcana event. Well, to be fair, I've only been in the Vegas DLC, but this was so much fun. I
it
mean,
was.
the venue was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
The atmosphere was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Meeting old friends, seeing people like you, meeting old friends I never met before in real life, like Mushu, and
Yeah,
making new
right.
friends. I mean, I stood in line and to do a pack rush with Ryan Miller, and I was standing right next to the Lorcana muses, Brittany and Stephanie, and oh my gosh, we became like instant friends. Like it was so cool.
Yeah, I kept telling everyone all weekend, like, the worst part of the weekend was losing in round 2 in the LCQ, and everything else has been awesome. And even that wasn't that bad because it didn't ruin my weekend. So I was, it's a bummer, but yeah, everything else was so much fun. Everyone was nice. Everyone we met, everyone we talked to, being able to see people, running into people, the artists, the pack rush with devs. I mean, everything about the weekend was great. I mean, the food, we got to eat
Yes,
basically Disney food.
that's what I was gonna say. They had this like their food was amazing. They had that bread bowl with mac and cheese and the burrito
Yeah,
and the Mickey pretzel with cheese. Oh,
yeah, and they had both a Lorcana cookie and a Lorcana Rice Krispie treat, where they print in food coloring, whatever they do. It's got the Lorcana the championship logo on it. It was great, and the cookie was yummy.
and like Saturday when we were all done, I just strolled over to downtown Disney and spent an hour over there. Like it was just so much fun. So
Yeah,
kudos to Ravensburger. Oh yeah, and they had Mickey Mouse there signing
right.
the promo cards. Like, come on,
Come on.
if
You
that's
know,
not fun.
it was great. It was an awesome time.
All right, so that was my first thing. I mean, I can't stress that enough because we're going to talk about stuff further down the line that are opportunities for improvement, but this was the most fun that I had. So,
Mhm.
the second thing that I wrote down was card draw / card removal. Ruby Amethyst will always be S tier. It doesn't matter. It's going to be 30 years from now when my Floodborn Flounder finally enters the game and Ruby Amethyst is still going to be winning.
Well, maybe not Ruby Amethyst, but whatever colors currently have all of the draw and all of the removal.
And it's still going to have the Madame Mim Merlin bounce package.
Right? Yeah. They'll just be all the different new versions. Like we'll finally get the germ in a few years. And if they ever rotate out or whatever they're going to do for power creep and rotation, we'll find out. But maybe the germ will come in and replace the fox or something,
But seriously, though, James, I remember, granted, this was like set 2 meta when it was all Ruby Amethyst. I remember Dan from the Forbidden Mountain was saying, why would you play anything else besides Ruby Amethyst? And I know, in the top 16, there was only one Ruby Amethyst deck, but it won. And Ruby Amethyst also won the EU CC, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
With Domingo
The
Martinez.
old mainstay won both just by being the old mainstay and doing what it does best, draw and remove.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's takeaway number 2. Number 3, and you, so I wrote the amount of stress on top level players. Okay. What do I mean by that? So if you were watching the live stream, or if you were at the venue in the waiting area, like James and I were, I have two memories that come to my mind. The first was after Zach won his round of 16, Zach Bivens. You had mentioned, I missed this, but you had mentioned that he looked up at the camera and he had tears in his eyes. Just the sheer amount of stress that this man has been under, I can only imagine how much stress, how much weight was lifted off his shoulders knowing that he's going to Worlds. And then he came off the stage and we went up and said hi and congratulated him. And again, he just, tears. And the second thing that I have was right before I left. I can't remember what round it was. I was loitering because Ryan Miller was right there. I was like, hey, I got to get a picture with Ryan Miller. And out the door comes Edmund Chu, who eventually won the whole thing. And he was just a wreck. Like, the amount of stress that are on these top level players is something that, because, I'm just like, yeah, I'll roll up with my little sealed deck and play a few games. But these guys, man, this is weight on their shoulders.
Yeah. I saw. Were we together when we saw Ed? Was that when you saw him?
Yeah.
The weekend is a blur, so I'm making sure that's when. And he was just like beelining for the restroom, I think.
Yep.
After playing the match. And the thing is that the stream was like 10 minutes behind. So he was out there in the lobby when his match was still going on inside on the stream. And so no one was supposed to know that he was, what had happened, but you could tell that something positive had happened. So when I went back inside a few minutes later and sat down at a table with a few other people, we were talking about it, and I just had to act like I didn't know that Ed had won while we were watching that final match. So it was interesting, just catching that moment, and just seeing what winning, what the release of the stress and the tears, or just the look on their face of how much the relief was for having won that match to get them into Worlds, or to get them a step closer to becoming the champion, and it was really cool to see. It's just, it's a stressful time. There's a lot going on.
I can't even imagine. And that's what it takes to be a top player. So,
yep.
Okay. My next positive takeaway here was spiciness matters. And what do I mean by spiciness matters? This is a list of the decks that won the top. I think this is top 8 coming right here. So we look at Ed's deck, 50% spicy, 45%, 44, 28%. Interesting. Both the steel amethyst were the lowest. 51%, 51%, and 43%. So what do we mean by spiciness matters? That is a good question. I actually messaged the creator of this Inkdex website, and I'm just going to read what he wrote to me, because I was like, I had a general idea, but this is what he said. So I want to share it in his own words. So he said, we calculate spiciness by taking all the deck lists classified under a given archetype. Using these, we calculate the average deck using similar to what we do here. And then he gives an example of Amethyst Emerald Bounce. Using that average deck, we determine how each deck in the archetype deviates from the average, which determines the spiciness value. This means that the spiciness may evolve over time. If multiple people build the spice and it slowly becomes a standard build, the spiciness value will decrease. We also redefine the archetypes from time to time to ensure they match the meta. A good example would be the Dwarves Mine decks. In the beginning, they were considered spice within Still Sawing aggro, but they eventually became their own archetype. So, James, does spice matter in these competitions? Is that the takeaway here?
So technically, yes, but what really matters is building the deck for the meta, and that's what spiciness is going off meta to counter the meta, is what was happening, especially with Ed's deck. He built it specifically to counter what he thought what he was going to see at this very limited one-time event. He thought he was going to see 1 out of 3 decks was going to be Ruby Sapphire, and he was right. Now, not personally right. If you watch the interview he gave with Eric Schweitzer at The Gamer, he said that he only faced like Ruby Sapphire once in the Swiss rounds the first day, and he faced like everything else.
Jeez.
So he built the deck for that, and it paid off because his clutch game was the final match where he was against Ruby Sapphire, and that's exactly what he had tech to build. And so that's what the spiciness is. The spiciness is building it to match or to beat the meta, and deviating from that. Now, this is just at the top. Obviously, spiciness is the rating of how far off meta you're going or off standard you're going when you're building some theme deck for a special day or at your league. It'll tell you how spicy it is. But it's just basically using cards in different numbers, or using cards at all that people really aren't using to try and win a game, essentially.
Yeah, and we're gonna get specifically into Ed's deck because it's worth talking about, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. So spiciness, I guess I think you explained it perfectly. Spiciness is a measure of how anti-meta a deck is, and Ed definitely brought the right spice here. Okay, my last positive takeaway that I want to talk about are these gorgeous promos. Here we have Cusco, and I just gotta say, isn't that a gorgeous card?
Yep.
I was not sold on it when I first saw it, that or Baymax. But seeing these in person, I am in love.
They are so vibrant. The colors are just popping off of the card, and having them be full art is so special.
Yeah, absolutely. Hold on. My computer is doing stuff to me. Okay. Let me remove this one, and then I want to bring up Baymax as well.
Okay. So yeah, so every single attendee got 2 of each because of the goodie bag turbo tickets, which enabled you to get 1 of each, and everyone got 2 turbo tickets. And then, of course, some people got more turbo tickets. LCQers who made it to round 3 got 3 more. But basically, everyone walked out of the event with these 2 cards, which is awesome.
Yeah, I think that's something else that I meant by the promos is just the fact that they were so generous with them. I mean, honestly, you got, like you said, you got the 1 of each for each Turbo Zone ticket. So you automatically got 2 of each promo. And then for each event that you signed up in, you got another one. And then, like you said, if you did well in a core constructed or, your LCQ pod, that's even more either Turbo Zone tickets or promos that you get. So, but this promo here is just gorgeous. And I can only imagine what it looks like in foil. Okay. I did see it foil at the vendor for the price of $11,000.
Well, there are only now 16 of those in the world.
Yeah.
So
it's more rare than the Golden Mickey.
Right?
Think about that.
Yeah. It's way rare. It's like it's basically the rarest card right now.
Yeah.
In Lorcana. I mean, there's probably some like test prints or something out there that someone might have that, dropped on the factory floor or something. Who knows? But basically, of anything that's available through regular channels in Lorcana, I think the Baymax foil is the rarest card in existence in Lorcana.
Are they the same rarity though? The Cusco and the Baymax?
No, the Cusco was handed out to I think the top 16, or the top 32. One of them was top. We'll have to go look, but basically, the Baymax was handed out at a higher level than the Cusco. You. So there's more Cuscos than Baymaxes, I think, by double.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, so those are my positives.
The Mickey was handed out to the top 4, but of course, we know that there's 500 Mickeys because they're serialized. We don't know how many Baymaxes and Cuscos there are. We just know how many have been handed out, and so we don't know if they're going to get handed out again. Like, will they be used at Worlds? Will they be used next year at the championship? We just don't know because they haven't announced anything.
So knowing that, James, if you had, one of these Baymaxes, would you sell it right now or would you risk it?
Heck yeah, I'd sell it. Because that meant I'd be going to Worlds and I have to pay to go to Worlds because that Baymax is going to pay for staying at Disney World for a week, going on vacation. Yeah, I'd sell it. It would have to pay for the trip to go to Worlds.
Yeah. All right, those are my positive takeaways.
I would keep the Elsa's Ice Palace, though.
Yeah, you would.
Yeah. And I'd probably keep a few of them, and I'd sell some. Whatever needed to pay for the vacation, I would sell. And just the way I would do it. I'm sure that's what a lot of people are doing. Is they're probably selling some, keeping others. Who knows? Just what you do. I mean, that's why they give things like that out, is to let the competitors have an option to either keep their prizes or sell them, because they're not going to give them any money. There's no cash prizes in Lorcana.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's a tangent. But
So
yes.
what are your positive takeaways?
So mine is one that you had, but I stole because I absolutely agree. And that's unlike in Europe, we got to be able to stay there all day, every day for the entire event. One ticket got you in, and you didn't have to pick a time frame, which I think was amazing, because there is no way I would have been happy being there for just 4 or 5 hours.
That would have been so unsatisfying.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I don't think I would have made that trip, although the
Right.
promos are pretty sick. But yeah, if you were only there for 5 hours, it's almost like, what's the point?
Yeah.
And I'm sorry. I'm sorry to the people in the EU. Like, that was the shaft, and I'm sure next year it'll be better. But that would be a negative experience in my book.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Being able to be there to, I mean, even if I wasn't in the LCQ, if I just showed up on Friday to just hang out and do side events, and then more side events on Saturday and get artist signings and whatnot. I mean, I was in line for artist signings and pack rushes because I was lucky enough to win a couple, and also signed up for like 4 others that didn't require a lottery. That all took the entire morning from like 9-ish until I think I took a break for lunch. But basically it took from 9 until about 3 to get all of my autographs and pack rushes done, just from waiting in lines and getting through those, because pack rushes take a while, so it's going to take a bit. Artist signings didn't take that long. I think the artist signings took like a 10th time of the pack rushes.
You always finagle me into signing up for these, and then inevitably I get so frustrated. But
Yeah.
that's something I'll talk about in the next section.
Yeah. So, but yes, being there all day, every day was amazing. And the next one, the venue. Listen, Vegas was okay. It was just a big warehouse. Seattle was okay. It was just a convention center. It was okay. Atlanta. That one was probably the worst of them, because it was basically just a giant cement basement. But this at the Disneyland Hotel with carpeting and cool lighting and nice white tablecloths on all the tables, and Disney music playing over the speakers inside the room.
Yes.
Oh man, just the
Ambiance.
atmosphere and the ambiance was just perfect.
Hold on, I just want to push back a little bit. Vegas was not a big warehouse. Vegas was a convention center. I think you're thinking of Fort Worth.
It felt like a big warehouse with those tables with no tablecloths. Come on.
Okay, that's fair. But yes, the venue was unbeatable. Like, I can't imagine how much that must have run them to hold the event there. But I cannot think of a more iconic location to have Worlds than that. Outside of being right in front of Cinderella's castle, I can't think of a more iconic place.
Yeah. Maybe sometime we'll be able to get the actual championship on a stage in front of the castle.
I can't
just
even
that
imagine.
Final match,
That would definitely boost the visibility of Lorcana.
Right. The next one is just specifically the Chaos Sealed that we did, the 2v2. Chaos is fun. Now, for those who don't know, Chaos is where they take 1 pack from each set, and that's what you open for a sealed event for your 6 packs and make a 40-card deck. And the randomness and, yes, chaos that ensues from that is pretty crazy. And I just had a lot of fun with it. I just think that the fact that they're coming up with fun new ways to play the game is really cool.
You had to talk me into this. And I think I even remember, did we talk about this last time on our podcast? You were trying to convince me to do it?
Maybe.
But yeah, because you were talking about how you and Eric were going to do it, but potentially, or maybe I don't know. Anyway, I had an event at that same time, and I was like, I don't know, because it's something I really want to do. I want to do multiplayer. That's what it was.
Yeah.
But you convinced me to play, and I'm so glad that you did, because it was so much fun.
Yeah.
And I remember I was like, James, you don't want me on your team. I'm just going to drag us down. But why don't you tell our dear listeners how we did, James?
I went 0-3, and Jared went 3-0.
Boom. That's right. Man, I don't know. I crushed Sil this weekend.
Yeah, you did. You did great. Now, granted, I crushed Sealed also, at least in the first chapter. So
yes, you did.
yeah, that was
Oh
amazing.
man, I should have had your picture of your deck ready to go to show everybody.
Maybe I'll show it by the time. I'll try and get it ready by the end of the podcast. But the final thing I had was our fellow players and attendees. Everybody was just great to play against. The people that beat me were a joy to play against. Everyone I talked to, meeting people, chatting with people, seeing friends, seeing. Oh, this is another part, is seeing two people from the store that I play at, that I have played against, be in the championship because they won their LCQ pod. And then hearing stories afterwards of how amazing that event is, and how hard it is, and like how focused you have to be, and just hearing some of the the inside baseball stories of what happens inside the championship, which I wish I could have done, but hearing it secondhand is still awesome. I was able to get a ride from a friend, and riding in the car was one of the people who was competing in the championship. Was getting a ride also. So I had to get up early on the second day when I hadn't planned to, but that was okay. But just hearing him talk about it, and then afterwards coming back and seeing like the invited to the ball promo with the foiling on it, and how pretty that card is, and just hearing him talk about it was just a great experience.
That's awesome. And I will second what you say. And I'm so grateful for all the people that I met. I feel like at this event, I was able to connect with people on a deeper level than at the Vegas DLC. And there's too many names to name off, but everybody I was able to connect with, I'm super grateful for. So
there seemed to be like more time to actually breathe and chat with people, right?
yeah, I think because I wasn't in the main event, I was
Right.
just doing the side events, so I did have more time. That makes sense.
Yep.
All right, moving on. I'm not going to call these negative takeaways because the event was absolutely brilliant, like I said, but I'm going to call these as opportunities for growth. Okay, so number one, when is Worlds? When is Worlds? James, when are we going to find out?
Someday. We'll find out someday.
But why? It's killing me. I cannot think of one good reason why we don't know when Worlds is.
Because they don't know when Worlds is?
Okay, that's the only good reason. Either they don't know when Worlds is, or their plans for Worlds fell through and now they're scrambling to find something else.
See, I don't know if they fell through. I honestly think that they may have had a plan, and then they realized that they could include Australia in those plans, and so they then now delayed it, which was good that we didn't get a date announced so that they didn't have to move it. But behind the scenes, maybe it had a date and they moved it, and now they have to figure out a weekend at Walt Disney World in the summer at a convention center.
Booking those events, you have to book them like at least a year in advance.
So now they're probably trying to figure out a weekend with the least amount of conventioneers attending Disney World, and try and find the weekend where it fits in, where they have enough space to run it.
Man, I don't know. I don't know
either.
But it's like, I don't know. I don't even know what to say. When is Worlds? When is Worlds? Okay.
Someday.
So my next concern, I'm gonna save one for last, but my next opportunity for growth is the fact that there were a different set of rules for EU versus NA. And what I mean by this is, in the EU, players were able to participate in both the morning and the evening pods. In North America, they can only participate in one. Which, I mean, we got Domingo Martinez as a result, and what an
Right.
amazing story that is. But somebody like uh, Dan Regal in North America had his run cut short on round 2 of the morning pod. So there's that. And then the other thing that was brought to our attention, I think it was Kindle, had mentioned that in the EU, the top players were able to intentional draw their way into day 2. In North America, they weren't allowed to because they'd gotten negative feedback in the EU about players, IDing. So, which is fine. Like, I appreciate that they take the feedback and they make changes accordingly, but it should have been on the next set. Like, both events should have been run the same.
Yeah. A lot of people said that, which is basically, yes, there's issues. Yes, you need to make changes, but you make them after the set. You don't change it mid-run. You don't change the rules on people mid-run. So some people play by one set of rules, and another set of people play by a different set of rules. That's just not fair. But it's what they did, and we'll just have to live with it.
Well, I mean, yes, we can't change it, but I also believe that there's value in bringing these things into the discussion, because if Ravensburger has shown nothing else, it's that they do listen and they take feedback. And I think it's important to offer the feedback for these opportunities of growth. But yes, standardizing the competition so that everybody is playing by the same rules. There you go. Okay. My next opportunity for growth. This is just a personal thing. I know there are some people who aren't bothered by this, like this guy over here. I hate waiting in lines, okay? Okay, here's the thing. I got a pack rush with Ryan Miller and Steve Warner. I'm like, sweet. How cool is it to go play, pack rush with these guys? However, they were, assigning these in 2-hour slots. I got in line. I was maybe like the 10th person in line. And after an hour and 40 minutes, there were 5 people who had gone. Okay? And there's probably like another 10 people behind me waiting to play Pack Rush. This is where I met the lovely ladies of Lorcana Muses. So thanks for letting me, hang with you guys. Otherwise, I would have been fuming. But 5 people in an hour and 40 minutes. Okay? There's still 5 people ahead of me. The chances of me making it there in 20 minutes, very slim. And so I think either they need to shorten the pack rush times, which I know they don't want to do because they want to take the time to play with, their the person who's there. Like, they want to connect, or they need to limit the number of spaces that they give out to people. So that way there aren't 50 people that sign up for it, but only 10 that get to go through.
Right. Yeah, that was one of the definite bummers of the weekend. Like, I waited. So I got in line because I timed it right to where I had both Shane and Steve Warner essentially at the same time. It was like half an hour apart. So I was able to, I got in line early for Shane, left by a few minutes, but then they said, oh, but he's running late. So, let's say I think it was supposed to be like at 3, let's say, or 2, whatever. Let's say 2. So he didn't get there until 2:15, 2:20. But I was first in line, so I didn't care. I would just immediately get in and play. So I played my game with Shane. Kicked his butt, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then had to got up and immediately got in line for Steve. And I was like 5 or 6 people back. And I think it took an hour or so. Now, granted, I did let the person behind me go in front of me because he needed to get to
You're so
an
generous, James. I'm just
well,
a greedy little Lorcana player.
Well, the people in front of me let him go too, so I wasn't the only nice one. There was other nice people in line. But we let him go, so that delayed it by another 10 minutes or whatever. But it was fine, And
Who was playing Pack Rush that got it done in 10 minutes, James? Tell me.
I don't know. Steve beats everyone quick, doesn't he?
I don't know. When you
10 or 15, whatever it was.
When you were playing Shane, you took at least 20 minutes.
Well, that's because I had to set up a combo and then destroy him with a combo.
Trust me, I was sitting in line waiting for Ryan, watching
Yeah.
every single minute pass.
It was, I got in, sat down for Shane, played my game for 20 minutes or whatever. I get up and Jared's moved like 2 feet. It
No,
was horrible.
that's not even the worst part. You had seen me get in line originally,
Yeah.
and then like half hour later, you come back to play with Shane. You tap me on the shoulder and you just laugh at me because I barely move.
And then I play with Shane and you barely move. And then I wait an hour and play with Steve. And had you left by that point because you gave up?
I went and played with another dev.
Yeah. Luckily they did do that. They had a bunch of devs sit down, and extra people came over to play so that they could relieve the pressure. Like, hey, if you're okay with not playing Ryan Miller, come over and play a dev so you can at least play a game and get a pack rush in. Which, for the people who chose that, it's fine. That's what, if you're offered a choice, it's up to you. Either that or you just sit and wait. There's some long lines.
Which feeds into my next thing. Kind of related, but a little different. So hear me out. All the waiting. Okay. So, there's waiting in the lines, yes. But then, for example, I played in the sealed Azurite Sea, and we played best of one. Oh my gosh, those games go by so fast. But then you have to wait like 40 minutes after you finish for the round to get over. And it's just like, we could bang this event out in 50 minutes if we put our minds to it.
Well, there's some people who take a while to play, so if there was even one game still going, they had to wait for them.
I know, and I hate it, okay?
You just don't like waiting. Now, one part of waiting that I will say was no fun and could have been handled much better is waiting for the LCQ pods to start. We had the player meeting at 9, and after the player meeting, we were supposed to be immediately paired and go into our pods, which means you would think that by 10 a.m. at the latest, we would have started. But we did not actually sit down and start playing in our pods until afternoon. And they kept telling us, hey, we're going to pair soon. We're just getting a few things handled. We're getting some accommodations handled. And I get it. Now what happened is that this wasn't a normal circumstance where they were just having issues with Melee or whatever it may be. They had decided the night before, or maybe they decided earlier and they just announced it the night before, to allow attendees to fill out a form and be put into a lottery that morning to fill any empty seats in the LCQ. And of course, that's going to take some time. And of course, getting 1,500 to 2,000 people through lines at 7 o'clock in the morning is when I think 7:30 is when they actually started letting people in. Getting close to 2,000 people in through lines, that's going to take some time. So not everyone was even in the room, on time.
Yeah.
People were coming down through the fires in LA and having to take a long drive around or being delayed in some way. Maybe flights were delayed because of that. Who knows? So they were being accommodating to a lot of people, and that took us a delay. But instead of telling us, hey, we have a lot of these things to do, we're going to give you an hour break. We won't do anything for an hour. Go and have a snack, go rest, go do something, be back here in an hour or else. Instead, they told us, sit in your chairs. We're going to pair in 15 minutes. Stay seated, find a seat, stay here. We're going to take 15 minutes and we're done. And then 45 minutes later, hey, we're almost ready. We're still accommodating some people. Go ahead and make sure you stay seated. And then 15, 20 minutes later, they did it again. And they just kept doing that for 2 hours instead of, I would say, probably knowing it's going to take some time, and maybe
I would have blown a gasket.
And just, it was. And so maybe if you're going to be changing things and dealing with the logistics of letting upwards of, 40, 50, 60 attendees get entered into the system in the pods, because that you're going to have a lot of people no show, maybe plan for the fact that you're going to start later and just let everyone loose for an hour and just get everything set, make sure everything's up and running and ready, and then make sure we're all back. I know that it's hard to wrangle 1,000 people, but
That's what I was
all of
gonna
us,
say. That's what I was gonna say. They'd probably let everybody go, and then nope, everybody wouldn't come back on time.
just tell everyone, look, if you're not back, you're out.
Yeah.
So be back in an hour, and then start it in an hour and 10 minutes. It's not that hard, but it just felt like they were just stringing us along, and it took over 2 hours, and that was not great.
No, it's not. All right, are you done whining?
Yeah.
Just tease it.
Hey, look,
Okay.
I'm just whining about how long it took. I had a blast hanging out with friends and chatting with people. Okay.
Yeah, and
So
to underscore what you're saying, we both agree that this is the funnest Lorcana event. We're just presenting opportunities for growth.
there you go.
Okay, so my last little minor one is technology / updating the brackets for those who can't watch Twitch. Like maybe you can see it on Twitch, but it seemed like the video lagged a lot there in the main viewing area.
Yeah.
And then what I seen people online saying was that on Melee, the top 16 were updating, and maybe that wasn't a bug, maybe it was a feature. But for those who can't watch Twitch, who want to stay, up to date on what's going on, it'd be cool for them to have an easy way to keep up to date on the tournament.
Yeah, I think they should have a scoreboard, especially for the day 2. I think there should be some kind of big scoreboard that they can update, whether it be a physical thing or just on a TV screen or a projector or something. I think a scoreboard to show what is happening on the stream, where we're at on the stream, so that obviously you don't go up and show, that Ed took out someone in the best of 16 round, and they're still playing it on the screen. Obviously, match it to the screen, but have something separate that people can just go look at real quick and see where we're at. No matter where they are in the hall, they can go around and come over and look real quick and see something to keep everyone in the hall updated and informed, so we can all feel that we're part of what's happening.
Yeah,
instead
that'd
of having
be cool.
to go figure out like where we're at on the stream, asking everyone next to you, hey, what round are we in? If it's just up on the screen saying we're in the octo finals and here's the people that are playing, and have the bracket up there, and just every time that someone wins and you see it on the stream, go ahead and put it on that bracket and update it. I think that would be perfect.
Dude, that'd be so cool. Like an NCAA,
Yeah.
bracket updating in real time.
Yeah, exactly.
That'd be cool. All right. So before we get on to the big one, you have your chapter 1 draft.
Yeah.
On
so I pulled no enchanteds, no legendaries at all in my first chapter stuff. But here's the deck that I built. And for those viewing it on YouTube, you can see it. But let me tell you some of the cool stuff. For 1 drops, I had a Lilo and a few others. For 2 drops, I had Grandma Tala. I had 1 jump ahead for Ramp, and then a few others like Flynn and the Prince, Eric. And then for 3 drops, I had 3 Kristoffs that are 2 lures. I had a Bodyguard with Hercules. I had a Rush with Rafiki and a Draw with Maleficent, and 2 friends on the other side.
Sick.
4 drops, I had the Killer card in Sealed, the You Have Forgotten Me, to make them discard 2. And 1 person I did use that on and make them discard their last 2 cards that they had in hand. It was insane. And then I had some other really good cards, of course. And then for 5 drops, I had 2 Mauis, 2 Goofies, a Mad Hatter, and a Cusco.
Some madness.
And then for 6 drops, I had 2 big Tinkerbells and a Robin Hood. And for the 7 drop, of course, I had a foil Be Prepared.
Oh man, did you bring a constructed sealed deck there?
Yeah, right? This thing worked like it was insane. I was on the draw all 3 games in my first chapter sealed, and I won all 3.
The only thing that can make it better is if there was a flounder.
Yeah, there was no flounder. I got the goons though. I got the goons and the Duke of Wesselton. But yeah, so this deck won me a pack each round. Nothing in the packs. I did get another big tink. It was hilarious. But yeah, my first chapter was a lot of fun because I did win a lot. It was a crazy good deck. I showed it to people and they're just like, did you build a constructed deck? What did you do?
Was
So I was okay with not having legendaries because I had so much fun just beating everybody I faced.
Those are pretty cracked packs, yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
So back to areas for improvement. I saved the big one for last here. And I labeled this transparency / trust me, bro. Okay. And let me preface this by saying we're going to talk about the players who were disqualified, in the top 128. But we're going to preface this by saying that the judges made the right call. I'm not questioning that. Like, under the circumstances, they made the right call. Okay? Okay. But the reason why I labeled this section as transparency / trust me, bros, because there were two players that were disqualified. One player, Dragon Johns, he uploaded a video where he shared his experience. He accidentally, is what he claimed, lost a card to Maui Shark, and one of the judges found the card, kept it instead of trying to find who it belonged to. A couple rounds later, they came up to him. They're like, hey, you're missing a card from your deck. How many Maui Sharks do you have? He's like, well, I have 3. He counted them. He only had 2. They're like, when was the last time you remember playing this Maui Shark? I wouldn't remember this. He's like, I don't know, last round? And they're like, haha, you lied. So we're disqualifying you because he was playing with one less card and lying to a judge. The other was Clara, who was playing her deck. And as she was playing, she realized she had an extra card, which as an aside, okay, here I am, super casual Jared. How do you have an extra card in your deck? How do you not have your deck
I don't think
locked
it was
and
an
loaded?
extra card. I don't think it was an extra card. I think it was a different card than her submitted deck list because she changed it last minute.
Okay, but still, regardless, how do you not have the proper deck list? This is
Right.
like the most important tournament of the season. It's a chance for worlds on the line.
A lot can happen. There's craziness happening. I can
I know.
understand it.
There's
but
stress,
yes.
but man, you gotta cross your T's and dot your I's. But still,
Yeah.
So she's playing. She gets to a point where she realizes, oh crap, I have the wrong card in my deck. And she has one of two choices to make. Number one, she could continue playing and hope that nobody notices. But then if they deck check her, then everybody will realize that she was playing with a different deck and she'll be forever labeled a cheater by an unforgiving community. Or she can tell the judge, be like, hey, I made this mistake. What do we do? And so she went to the judge, admitted her mistake, and got disqualified. Okay.
And not disqualified specifically for having the wrong card in her deck, but because she had already played 2 rounds with it and there was no way to turn back the clock. And I think that's what the disqualification was for. I don't know. I mean, that's possibly what it was. I don't think just having, because I think it's a warning or a game loss. It's a game loss.
So this is why I labeled this section "Trust Me, Bro" for a couple of reasons. One of the members of the community who's involved in the judging community, listed out a series of things, and he says, "You are not going to get a statement from Ravensburger or Pro Play Games about any penalties that were issued at any DLC event. We've been through this before. It's just not the way they do things." And then, and the official Discord, a user named Sienna posted a lot of things that I thought was interesting, who is familiar with the judging program. Sienna said, I think you fundamentally misunderstand how DQs work. There are essentially 4 reasons a player can get disqualified. Number 1, intentionally breaking a game rule with the intent of gaining an advantage or trying to cover up an accidental violation, aka cheating, which I think is where both of these, players fall into place here. Number 2, intentionally breaking a tournament rule, disrupting the event, or putting others in danger. Number 3, intentionally falsifying the result of a game. Number 4, intentionally engaging in wagering. No, all these involve intent. A player is only ever disqualified if, after a thorough investigation, the head judge determines they intentionally acted in a way they can reasonably be expected to know is unacceptable. And then further, just a couple more paragraphs here. He says the process for disqualifying from a judging perspective is as follows. Once a suspicion of behavior warranting a DQ, mostly cheating and severely unsporting conduct, arises, an investigation takes place involving A, the offending player, B, the head judge, C, usually the judge who discovered the issue, and D, the tournament organizer or Ravensburger representative, if available. This investigation determines whether or not the player's behavior was in fact behavior warranting a DQ, according to the PCG. These kind of decisions are never made lightly and never alone. That being said, the affected player doesn't take part in all the discussion happening, especially in the part where the head judge discusses the verdict with the tournament organizer. So even if great care is taken to explain the final decision to the player, they will always have missing information. And this can sometimes result in social media posts by such players that make it seem like the DQ is unwarranted because they genuinely don't understand it fully. And this right here is where I have the issue. They will always have missing information, and this can sometimes result in social media posts by such players that seem like the DQ was unwarranted. So this is why I labeled it the Trust Me Bro source, because at the end of the day, we have what Dragon John said and what Clara said, and we don't have Ravensburger's side. There has to be a good reason. Like, even you and I were talking about this earlier. Even if it was something as simple as player was found violating section 73.3 and was disqualified for that, that would go a long way. Like, give us a reason, because they tell us not to speculate, but what do they expect us to do?
Yeah, it's a human thing. We want to know what's happening, and also it would also help to know what's happening and what kind of things to look out for as players, to know what not to do. You know, what things are they looking for? What kind of ways can we mess up unintentionally that get us disqualified as if it was intentional, if that's what is happening anyway? So I think that some kind of information should be disseminated in a manner that is not like accusatory at the person, just like, hey, this rule was broken, they were disqualified. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. That's all we need to know, because right now it just feels like by not talking about it, they're trying to hide something. And maybe they feel like if they do talk about it, they'll be backed into a wall, and they don't want to defend, the decision that was made. So it's easier to say nothing than something. But at the end of the day, I feel like if we had a little bit of transparency, it would help the players, because somebody like Clara and even John, like, I feel like those were honest mistakes. And if Ravensburger came out and said, yes, this is why the player was disqualified, then people will be like, okay, well, at least they weren't like, intentionally misshuffling their decks. Maybe they weren't like honest mistakes. We can forgive honest mistakes. But now they have this scepter of being, oh, that was the person who was disqualified at the NACC. But number two, it also helps the judge, because I know I've seen online a lot of judges are getting flack right now. But at the end of the day, if Ravensburger came out and said, yes, we support the judge for this reason, then that would deflect some of the heat off of the judges, knowing that, Ravensburger had their backing.
Yeah. It's a messy situation no matter what.
It's a messy situation, but I feel like and I'm not saying for every single event they need to explain every single disqualification. I understand that would be a huge undertaking and probably something nobody would ever pay attention to. But for events like the NACC or Worlds or EUCC, I think that's something that would be beneficial for the player base. So anyway, I'm getting off my soapbox. Do you have anything else to add to that, James?
Not really. I mean, just that since we don't have the full story, we don't have the full story. So, please don't jump to any severe conclusions and, take your anger out on one way or the other.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I preface this conversation with, I'm not trying to rag on the judges, because under the current rules, under the current, guidelines, they made the right call. So I just wish that we had some more information. And for somebody like Clara, where this was an honest mistake, it feels like there should be, I don't know. Okay, let's move on. So, James, do you have any opportunity for growth takeaways, or did we cover them all?
We covered all of them. I can't think of anything else.
All right, so I want to travel back in time 1 week. In our last episode, we made predictions for the type of news we hoped to hear from this weekend. So, James, let's put up a little scoreboard and see how we did. Okay, so item number 1, you predicted that we would get at least 10 Arcasia's Island cards. Did we get 10 Arcadia Islands cards?
No, and not only did we not get 10, we got 0.
0. Okay. I predicted a World's Date. Did we get a World's Date?
No.
Okay. You predicted a Set 7 story trailer. Did we get a Set 7 story trailer?
No, we did not.
Oh my gosh. We should not go into the forecasting business here. So
No, we should not.
What did we get, James?
We got the announcement of a new franchise coming to Arcasia's Island.
Yeah.
And what franchise is that? I think you're going to show it, right?
Yeah, sorry, I slacked. I'm pulling up the image right here.
That's
so
okay. We're going to talk about. So what we got is an image, a new piece of art featuring a friendly canine lady from Lady and the Tramp, which is, of course, a good indication that Lady and the Tramp is coming to Arcasia's Island. So there you go.
And if you look in the back here, you see what's his name, Jacques, and who's the other doggy? I can't
Tramp,
remember.
or is it one of the other the friends?
These guys back here.
I can't see that. That's so small on my screen.
Oh, that's fair. Okay. So
it's like
somebody,
this big. It's like this
somebody
big.
wrote the name in the comments.
But we also got the release date for Arcasia's Island, March 7th in stores and or in local game stores and Disney Store, or at least the parks, and then March 21st for the big box release.
Yeah. So
And that was it.
We got some news. It's not news that we had predicted, but yeah, it's something.
I felt like they were going to take the opportunity to use this platform as essentially a lorecast, and that did not happen, and I'm kind of bummed.
I am too. Yeah, that's another thing. Where is the lorecast?
Now, again, we just came off the holidays, and everybody was out of the office, and everybody was planning for EU and NACCs. So I am cutting them a little slack on actually having it all done immediately, but I really hope we get it in the next week or two.
Same. All right. So one last thing before we leave this high-level talk about the event. James, you ran, as you said, Ruby Amethyst deck. And by the way, if you want to shout out who your coach was, feel free to shout
I think it would probably be pretty obvious. Kendall Burdett was my coach.
Yes, Kendall Burdett. So so you're as qualified as anyone to tell us what made Ed's deck so special. The ink deck spiciness meter gave it a spiciness of 51%. So tell us, as I'm bringing this up on the screen, what was the sauciness that made this deck so good for this tournament?
So again, if you listen to Eric's interview at the Gamer, it's basically fully teched for the Ruby Sapphire matchup, and that's why you will not see any Fifth Spirit Elsas, no Genies, no Madame Medusas. Those are all not great in that matchup. And so he put in the 4 Tremaines instead of usually like 1. He put in 2 Sisus, big Sisus instead of 1. He has all 4 Be Prepareds when a lot of people were going down to 3. And he put in 4 libraries when, if anyone was putting them in, like me, put them into my Ruby Sapphire deck. I only had 2. But also he added 4 more 1-drops with the small Diablo. And what he was doing is he was basically saying, I need to draw a ton of cards, and I need to be able to remove singular characters on my opponent's board as efficiently as possible. And that's why there's 4 Tremaines, because that needs to be in hand as often as possible to get those Maleficent Dragons, Tamatoas, Maui Sharks, all of those things that will ruin your day. He needs to be able to control and get rid of as soon as they appear on the board. And that's exactly what he did.
And I will say I've tested this on Ink Table. This deck draws an insane amount of cards.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing with the library is not only is it a draw machine because of all those 1-drops. So even if you pull a 1-drop late in the game, all it does is refill your hand with 2 cards typically if you have a library out. But the library stays for a while and gives you extra lore. And as Ed shows, in that last game, you can drop 3 libraries and your opponent has a hard time dealing with it if you have your Tremaines in hand and your other removal, and you can just keep clearing the board while you're drawing cards and having those libraries give you lore every single turn. And you can catch up from a 17-6 deficit to win the game.
And even you can do something as stupid as moving all of your characters to the library, questing, and then be preparing them. Like, and you fill up your whole hand. Like, it's totally ridiculous how good this deck is.
Yeah. So, but the thing is that even he said this is not a deck that you would necessarily want to take to a set champs, because unless you're set champs, you know you're going to be facing like 30% of the field is Ruby Sapphire, because that's what it's built to beat. Now, obviously, he beat a bunch of other decks. If you read what he went through, or you see his post on Twitter of what the decks he went through Emerald Steel, he went through, I think, Amethyst Steel, and another Ruby Amethyst. I mean, he basically, as he said, ran the gauntlet of decks to get where he got. But in the end, facing a Ruby Sapphire made the battle that much easier for him, because that's what he was planning to fight against.
Yeah. Incredible. I mean, hats off.
Yeah. And another thing, the consistency here. A lot of people, like even for me, I didn't like doing it, but I felt it was necessary, as I had, I think, 4 or 5 1-ofs in my deck, just for tech cards for different situations. But you'll notice that he ran 4 of everything except for the Sisu and what was the other 2 drop? The Crab. Those were the only 2 ofs. Everything else was 4 of. So everything was consistent. He knew that he was going to get his answers at some point if he just drew enough cards, and he always had a way to draw cards. It's just the way it goes, and he was masterful at it.
He really was. That's what I was going to underscore, is watching Ed. Okay, and it's not just Ed. Watching all these players at the highest level pilot the decks the way that they piloted them, it's a thing of beauty to behold. And I was really honored to be there and witness that. Even though I didn't stay for like the final 4 on, I caught some of that on the replay. But sitting there on Sunday, I was perfectly content to sit there watching, the games playing out.
Right.
Until we had our chaos. But
like watching Zach in that one game where he was at 3 ink for like 95% of the game. He was at 3 ink and won the game. It's crazy. He didn't go above 3 ink until like near the last 2 or 3 turns, and then just was outplayed his opponent masterfully with that last move of throwing down a Pete to stop any actions in case there was a Be Prepared. Threw lethal on board and had 3 lore ready to quest, and the opponent couldn't do a thing.
Yeah.
So,
amazing.
Just watching all those top level players play was so much fun.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've shared our takeaways. We talked about the champion deck. Are there any stories, any anecdotes you want to share before we head up? Peace out.
Okay, so I promised her I would talk about our match on the podcast.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So remember, I mentioned that I beat up a 10-year-old girl in my first LCQ match. Shout out to Izzy and her dad Ace, who I spoke with multiple times over the weekend. We kept running into each other, so I had some fun conversations with him. He had competed in Seattle, and he had brought 2 of his boys to compete, and it was Izzy's turn to compete, so she got to come to the LCQ. And so she brought Amber Amethyst aggro, and as I said, I got the dice roll, so I was able to go first. Did our first match. She was calm. She was chatty. She didn't have any issues playing the game at all. She didn't seem nervous. Basically a perfect opponent who I was able to have fun talking to and laughing with and playing, even though we're sitting here like, hey, one of us has to lose and one of us gets to go on and try again to keep going in this thing. So I beat her round 1. or game 1, she beat me in game 2, and in game 1 it was kind of a fight, but in game 2 she just demolished me.
As aggro decks tend to
As
be.
aggro.
It's feast
So
or famine.
yeah, she had played like 2 when she didn't have anything going on, like in the middle of the game. She just played 2 Gathering Knowledge and just like upped her lore 4. I'm like, okay, great. And then she had it in hand with 18 and nothing on this, nothing for. I had demolished her board, and she just like, oh, but I'm at 18 and here's a Gathering Knowledge and I win.
That's awesome.
So we're sitting there and we're shuffling up and doing our mulligan for the 3rd game, and we just finished the mulligan, and she just kind of leans in a little bit, and she goes, "You're sweating now, aren't you?" And I'm like, "Oh my goodness."
She's trash talking already.
She was trashed. She was talking smack. It was crazy.
It's awesome.
But I'm like, I was actually like, yeah, actually, because it's on the line now. This is game 3. But I didn't want her to know that, like, I actually was sweating. So I was just laughing about it. But no. So I saw her and her dad repeatedly throughout the weekend. They were enjoying themselves. They ended up in a Turbo Zone pack rush pod with us, so I was able to chat with them a bit, get a photo with them, and I think it's just awesome, that there was more than one kid in the LCQ, and I just think it's awesome sitting down across from it. I just don't know what's happening that both in Vegas and now this, I sit across from the smack talking preteen girls. It's like a thing now.
That's funny.
But no, it was great. I had a great time. That's my fun story for the weekend is getting talked smack to by a 10-year-old.
My concluding thought on the event was it was so cool. I mean, number 1 to be there, but number 2 to run into citizens of Lorcana Nation. I mean, we were sitting there on Sunday watching the feature match, and we had this guy come behind us, Jazz. He's like, "Oh my gosh, are you guys citizens of Lorcana?" And he's like, "Man, I love listening to you guys. It's like, on my car drive home, it's like listening, to a couple of friends." And, when you and I played in the Chaos event, every one of our opponents, I think, had heard of us, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah. And standing in line for one of the pack rushes, or no, it was a meet and greet with Shane Hartley. One of the devs, Fletch, he just had one of the this is my family, the Encanto playmat.
Right.
And he's like, yeah, I like to have people sign my playmat, people that I meet. So he's just going around, and then he has me sign it, has the next person sign it, turns around, he's like, so tell me about yourself. And he was talking to the other guy, and he's like, how about you? Where are you from? I was like, oh, I'm from Vegas. He's like, how long have you been into Lorcana? I was like, well, I actually started a podcast about it before the game ever came out. No way. What podcast is it? I was like, well, Citizens of Lorcana. He's like, what? That's you? And I mean, it's just cool, those connections that we get to make with people. I mean,
Yeah.
that in of itself is ultimately what it's all about.
Yeah, it was funny. For the Rise sealed that I did was happening during, I think, right around the time of the top 8 or the top 4, maybe even near the final. And so I was actually standing over by the viewing area, like in between matches, trying to watch what was happening. And I think it was the final, because as I was walking away, I'm like, oh, I got to go. My match had paired like a minute ago. I'm like, I got a minute or two to get there. And my opponent's probably sitting there waiting, or they're not even there too, and they're watching it. So it's no big deal. But as I'm walking away, that's when the things popped, and we knew that Ed had won. So I'm racing down to my match, like at the back of the room, and I sit down, and the guy's like, "Oh, you showed up," and I'm like, "Yeah, I was just watching the thing on the screen," and he's like, "Yeah, I was watching a minute ago too." And so we sit down. I'm like, "Oh, and by the way, here you go," and I give him one of our ink tokens, and he's like, "Wait, you're citizens of Lorcana?" I'm like, "Yeah, well, I'm half of them." And he's like, "Ugh," he's like, "I should have recognized your voice," because he was a listener. So
Oh, that's
that was really cool. But yeah, it was fun meeting all these people, meeting everybody. It was great.
You know what? Your conversation sparked one more thing that was an opportunity for growth for Robin's. Okay, so there was no prize wall at NACC.
Yeah.
The prize was getting the promo, for the sealed events, which was awesome. However, what that led to was a lot of people signing up for events, staying until they got the promo, and then bailing.
Yep.
There were so many, and then not dropping from the event. There were so many times that people got paired against an empty chair. So
Yeah, a lot of empty chairs.
yeah.
I mean, if you can get a promo, you're paying $20, $30, $40 for an event, and you're getting a promo that's worth $50, $60, $80. I mean, why wouldn't you run as many of them as you could if that's your thing?
Yep.
Yep.
All right. So we have one little bit of news that you found, and this is right here. Ravensburger appoints new head of sales for Disney Lorcana. Okay. So this guy, his name is Enrico Tessinari, and I'm sorry if I butchered your name, Enrico. I truly am. Okay. But he has quite the history. He started with Wizards of the Coast, Magic the Gathering. He's responsible for overseeing organized play. Across EU markets as part of the team. Again, Europe. Recently, he managed the Pokemon licensing merchandise from team at Takara Tomy. Before joining Ravensburger, Enrico was head of sales for EMA and Oceania at Konami, publisher of Yu-Gi-Oh!, where he worked alongside the Konami team to reset distribution and OP in EU and Australia. He says he's really excited to join. Anyway, the reason why I read all that is because this guy here sounds like he's got some experience pushing the game out into new markets and into new territories, and maybe even helping with organized play.
And making sure the markets that do have it are as efficient and running smooth as possible.
Yeah, so sounds like a good pickup from Team Ravensburger there.
And it says he's going to be work out of the UK for the global brand. So he's not just handling Europe; he'll be handling everything, or at least being in charge of everything.
All right. Yep. So
that's it.
Yes. So if you liked what you heard, you can follow us on YouTube. You can subscribe to us on the podcasting platform of your choice. If you liked what you heard, you can share. Sharing is caring. And you can find me on the website formerly known as Twitter at Citizens of Lorcana. And James, why don't you land this plane and tell everybody where they can find you?
You can find me everywhere online at Dan Regal. And thank you again to everybody we met at the National Champs. Thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. And we'll see you next time.